India, you look at religious pluralism in India. I mean, these are all issues that I think we are talking about all the time in this country. And as well, of course, you also are looking at Hindu society broadly. So you have a context in which you actually place your research. So we look forward to hearing from you on all of these issues, particularly on Hinduism in China, past and present. Please.
Thank all of the distinguished guests to come to share time with me. And especially thank, of course, ICCR to invite me here. And 22 years back, I was an ICCR student studying JNU. And more than 10 years back, I was again a scholar studying JNU. So from that, actually, my career started from history of India. And then I shifted to the contemporary Indian society social change. So we follow the Sanskritization, modernization, and secularization. We did 3 books of this in China. I did 2, and Professor Lin Chenjie did the modernization one. And so after that, I do think without understanding of religion in India, it's difficult to understand India. So I shifted to, again, to religions in China. And then the place where I work is the Institute of World Religion, Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, which is the largest institute who are doing research on religion in the world. We do all the religion in the world. And so I take this Ford Foundation's Asia Scholarship, and I did Mata Amrita Dhamai in Kerala as a case study of new religious movement in India. So I try all the way to understand Indian religion, Hinduism, and other religions. Of course, we're concerned about the religious conflict and how it affects Indian society and India's development. So basically, we are concerned about religion and security, religion and law, and the religious policies of different governments in the world. So we are doing actually comparative studies. This morning, I was giving the same topic, talking to the university in Noida. And people keep telling me religion is a very sensitive issue in India. So I realize how dangerous I am. But for this one, Hinduism in China, I think is quite safe. Yes, and for the last 20 years when I do Hinduism, the general introduction to Hinduism, I did this for China, for Chinese to understand India and the main religion in this society. After 12 to 15 years of research, it's come up this introduction to of Hinduism, and this one selected to the National Achievements Library. This serious book is very top by the national levels. So I'm glad they choose Hinduism inside this particular library. And this considering the highest price I can have in China. With this, there is one chapter about Hinduism in the world, all over the world, and this little chapter about Hinduism in China. So today I start from there and shift a little bit more on other areas. Not only part of that I covered in this book. Last year, I did another one of Hinduism in Yunnan province and published in the periodicals. So I prepared this for some time, and I'm glad to share some of my research with you. And choose this topic because we are going to celebrate our 17th anniversary diplomatic ties between India and China next year. And of course, we have very rich resources about Buddhism, as everybody knows. But Hinduism, people generally ask, were there any Hinduism at all in China? So start with that. I start my presentation today. No? Oh, there. Just this PPT is very simple. I must apologize, I didn't prepare properly. But basically, I will talk about the 4 roads of Hinduism to China, and in ancient China, and Hindu gods and goddesses in contemporary China. And we have new discovery of Hinduism in China in recently, just 2 or 3 years of archaeology work. And then we have some kind of conclusion. So where I shall direct? Sorry. Okay, there are 4 roads of Buddhism come to China. Exactly the same roads that is also Hinduism come to China. The 4 roads are basically the number 1, the ancient Silk Road. Everybody knows from Sichuan to the northwest part of China and to Central Asia, of course to India and this area. That's basically the most famous one, and even to Rome, to further west. And the second road we call the Himalaya Road. So it starts from North India and to the Sikkim and the Kailash area, to further to Tibetan area. And now the third one, right. This is Professor Batch, who had taught in Beijing University many years ago. He wrote like Hinduism actually overshadowed by Buddhism, and it's also important to broaden our research, not only Hinduism, but not only Buddhism, but we discover Hinduism in China and influence China's society as well. It's important. So encouraged by his research, that's why I did some research. Now the third one, we called the passage of tea and horse. That starts from Assam area to Burma and to Yunnan province, and further China's inland. And the fourth one is Maritime Silk Road from Tamil Nadu and even Kerala to Fujian province. Now, the Silk Road, Chinese scholars have done some research on how these images of Hanuman and from Agenda to Dunhuang. And those areas, we have very rich resources, and we have done a lot of research mainly on Buddhism, but also some scholars did some on Hinduism as well. So I dropped that road, the first road. The second road also, a lot of Chinese scholars have done a lot of research on that. So I also dropped that one. And the third one, as I said, I just published a book, the article on this one. So for the preparation of next year's anniversary, the Indian embassy in Beijing actually will hold a big function in the Fujian province, and to add the after the fall program after the successful summit in Chennai. That's why I will concentrated on Fujian, the maritime Silk Road, this time today. Okay, but before that, just some background. Hinduism in ancient books will have very rich resources. Now the problem is we draw all these resources, the materials from the ancient books. We need to construct it and even do a lot of translation. That's a lot of work because you know we Chinese are good at writing historic record. And for that one, we set up a project to do that. Now, Hinduism as a religion, as a state religion, as official religion, did exist in China. That is in Lanzhou Empire, which is in Yunnan province, in Dali area. There's a big kingdom called Lanzhou. From 17th to 10th century, Brahmanism, Chinese always called Hinduism Brahmanism, is one of the three official religions in that state. And there are a lot of materials and the statues and the scriptures. I did some research on that and published here. And so the most resources we have, most richest resources we have is the Chengdu's over 1,000 years of historic link with South India now today. And you can, there are a lot of resources there. And there's an Italian merchant who supposed to write a book on set of night, and very early time, 1271, and he described the Indian merchants, men and women, specialized, very unique, with beautiful, very beautiful Indian lady, and eat vegetable, milk and rice instead of meat and fish, all sorts of things. But some scholars, like Professor Tan Sen-Sin, said this book definitely is a fake one. So that raises the question again: why people make the fake one to describe the people who live in Chengdu? And for us, for Chinese, for the Fujian province people, this everything described is all right. No problem at all. Now, this Vishnu statue is one of the beautiful one in the Maritime Sacred Museum in Chengdu, and now is one of the best pieces in that museum. Mr. Ambassador of India just visited this museum. And my book, actually, the first picture is this one. And I'm going to compare. This one is from the same place, Qiu Temple. It's a Buddhist temple, but you can see this is from a Hindu temple. And all that, a lot of stones and corridors and the steps are built exactly a Hindu temple style. And the following I'm to compare. The first one is Chengdu Maritime Sacred Museum, and the next one is from South India. And the image through the comparative study, you can see if we trace back to South India, it's definitely true. And the Chengdu statue is new and maybe more clear. And next year we are going to have, we hope we can have some scholar from Tamil Tamil Nadu to do the scriptures to help us translate in detail about the language, solve the language problem, because we have those we don't know the details, and also the Tao Te Jing, the text of Taoism, actually is translated into Tamil, and we need some scholars to find out and translate and do something and the deep research on that one as well. So actually, Taoism, Taoist textbook is also in Tamil Nadu. A lot of groups there. Now start. The first one is Chengdu. The next one is South India. And so I did some comparative study. You can see the Chengdu one is new, but they are basically the same, exactly the same. This is the corridor of Kaiyuan Buddhist temple, and you have images of the goddesses. And the next one is from South India. And you can see the exactly the same thing. Yeah. Okay. And you are familiar with those Krishnas and Ramas and the Prabhupada, and okay, from that you can tell we trace back to South India, and that is no problem. Now there are some Hindu gods and goddesses living in China, and people worship them as the Buddhist, like Guan Yin. You see this one in the Chidian village of Fujian province, which is near Chengdu. And the village people worship as Guan Yin. Actually, is the Hindu goddess from South India. And you can find this quite often in China. People realize from a very ancient time this is Guan Yin, but actually it's not. But they stay there as Guan Yin, and will continue to stay there as Guan Yin in the future, of course. And there are a lot of temples we call folk religion or popular religion temples. They actually have a lot of Hindu gods and goddesses and images inside, especially in Chengdu area. And this is the White Dog Temple. It's a popular religious temple. And in that temple, and you have all this Sivalinga, and some has mixed with Nandi, and other images of the Hindu. From that, you can see actually it's not only one branch or school of Hinduism. It's all sorts of and the Sivas and the Vishnus and the Saktis, all sorts of schools are there and used to have temples in Chengdu. Now, that happened in ancient time and has not very much influenced Chinese society, but it tells very nice story and how peacefully those gods and goddesses come to China, to that particular area, and stay there and live there and still worship there. Whatever, as a Buddhist god or Buddhist god or as a folk religious one, it doesn't matter. Now we need to dig more and to find more connections and even new methods to link these two countries. But very much encouraged, we find more. This one, just 3 years back, the archaeologists work in the small village in a Buddhist temple. We found this. And people don't know, so they asked me to come to this village and to tell them what's this. So from there, you can and it's a very nice story, because this one is actually found in the monk's room. So this is Buddhist temple, and found in the monk's room. From that, we can imagine who is running the Buddhist temple in China at that time. I mean, actually, it's Hindu priest running a Buddhist temple in China. So that can tell why we Chinese don't actually distinguish Buddhism with Hinduism. They think that they are the same, and the function is same in China, in those villages, in those temples, and that area. Another thing is also interesting. You see, we China, we never have lion in China, the animal, the lion. But now, in every important palace and big household and the government building, in front of the door, we always have 2 lions, one male, one female, and one with carrier kids, another one play a ball. How this one come to China? And this area, Fujian, actually is the original place of lion dance in China. When we celebrate Spring Festival, you see this lion dance everywhere, in the United States, in Europe, in every country, even here. And but we never had that animal. And how they come to China. In this one, not only this image found out, but also a lot of small lines are there. So because this time we are not good at write records. We don't have material to tell the story and how they made it, why they make this one. People never see. But this place is the original place of lion dance in China. So, and the influence of Hinduism, when they come together with the goddess, with their own gods and goddesses, and not only influence the spiritual aspect, but also the material or the cultural aspect, all the way. Now, a lot of more comparison. There is a structure of Shiva temple. And I want to emphasize Chinese scholars did some research on Hinduism in China. This is the image of reconstruction of the old ones by Dr. Li, who did his PhD in United States. But it's about Chengdu, about the structure of Shiva temple. Now, since the opening up and reform last 40 years, a lot of foreigners come to China, and Indian, with a very large group of Indians come to China. They stay in Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and even small places like Dali in Yunnan province and like Dalian in Shandong provinces. They have different concentration area, because some are doing computer, some Indians are doing cotton and other things. But they are in the group. For example, a lot of Sikh people, they come to do the business in the EU and other coast area. And they perform the religious things which Chinese government and people couldn't understand. That's why we are getting that after 5 major world religions, we are studying the five small religions in China now. The 5 big religions, we have Taoism, Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism. And now there's Hinduism, Baha'i, Orthodox, and Mormon. They're fresh in China, and a large group of people with this religious background, so which gave us a lot of work to do. The Hinduism, the people, they functioning, the religious, they celebrate their own festival, and they do all this peacefully in China. And so it's our duty to help the government and ordinary people to understand what's the meaning of them, why they do this, and how good they are doing this. And another influence is some religious groups come to China, like ISKCON, Sai Baba, and other groups. They're in a very small number, and most of them are in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Macau, but mainland China, more and more. Now, the most important one, of course, is yoga. Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Li Keqiang did very good demonstration of yoga Tai Chi performance in the Temple of Heaven in Beijing. That's the most important temple in China, and only emperors use that temple. So after that, yoga sort of become fresh in China, and I have that estimate. After a few years, there will be more Chinese practice yoga than Indians, believe it or not. If you're considering how the Buddhism changed and flourished in China, maybe that would be true. Now, my very simple conclusion. The Hindu gods and goddesses enter China in a very peaceful way without any conflict or violence of any kind along the Silk Road, for all 4 Silk Roads. And the discovering of some statues up and down, or incarnation of Vishnu, and in Fujian and other area. All this tell us they were still there and continue there, and the people still worship them as gods and goddesses of folk religion or Buddhist religion. And Hinduism actually in China has reached Buddhism in China. And the relation of these two actually is Hinduism actually enriched and helped the Buddhism flourished in China. And now, since yoga has become a new link between the 2 countries, we need to do much more research on this, because Chinese government has some concern about the religious aspect. Now, most of yoga center is as a exercise to get relief get relaxed, get stress released. But the government have some concern about the influence of religious aspect. But for yoga, it's not something you can't cut off completely with like Hindu philosophy. For people who want to practice properly, it's their willingness to learn more Indian philosophy, about yoga philosophy, and others. So for that one, we have to do some research on that. Now, Hinduism's influence in China, as I said, is not only on religious aspect, but on other things, much wider cultural areas, like music, like painting, like scripture, like astronomy, like mathematics and medicines. All areas have influenced. And it's lucky Chinese scholars have done a lot of research on this. And some texts it's not exist in India anymore, and we found in China, and we found in Tibet, and we recreate those and let them return to India. And in that way, I think it's also a good thing. Now, Indian government through ICCR has set up a yoga college in China. That is the first yoga college outside India, and it's in Yunnan Minzu University. And this yoga college has gone so fast. They started with very short-term training class for 3 months, and then they start like BA and now MA. From next year, they will start PhD on yoga. And that college, yoga college, developed well with the help of India Embassy and the consular in Guangzhou. Because I'm the supervisor of that college, sometimes I bring some yoga professors from Oxford or other university to give them lectures as well. So yoga will, we should do some work to guarantee it developed in China healthily and smoothly. So I'm quite optimistic about this, but still we need to do a lot of work. And in detail, we have something to dig out. For example, the first boat with Indians merchants come to China is what time? Because the Indian ambassador told me we're going to have a function, the conference there. One section will be on the boat, and we will set a right moment to finish that session of discussion. And when they reach the port, it's almost exactly the same time. So a lot of work we are going to do in the future. But not only this, I must add, Chinese scholars is also doing the Sikhism in China, especially in Shanghai area, and Jainism in China as well, because all the people, Indian people, they come, they want to trace the old temples they have in China. Like yesterday, I talked to Mr. Chinori in IDSA, and his sixth generation grandfather went to China and built a Jain temple in Jiangsu province. So follow that, Chinese scholars has a lot of work to do, because Hindu religions we're considering it's a wide range of also all these religions, and they existed in China once, and we want to find more of this. But it's very difficult because even their ancestors didn't leave enough material for them to tell us. But for Chinese scholars, they are important. They are important because Indian people think it's important. And for China, we will have to help to find more resources and more links between these two cultures. With that, I think we are proud we can do this kind of work. Even I feel lonely in China. Frankly, not many scholars in China doing Hinduism, and they are not doing Hinduism in China at all. But I think it's important, and I quite enjoy doing all this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Qiu, for that very interesting presentation. Frankly, I didn't know many of the things that you were speaking about here. They are completely new to me, so I've learned a lot from your presentation. The fact that in many ways there were Vishnu temples in southern China, we were aware of, but the ability, the way in which it was transmitted through the Assam route is a new discovery for me at least. I'm sure there are many more learned people here who already knew these things, but I didn't. The interesting part, of course, is I particularly sort of, um, would like to remark on some of the comments that you made, that it's the pluralism in Hindu religion that seems to have struck you in your researches. And also that, in a sense, Hinduism moved into China in whatever small way it did, in a very peaceful manner, without actually upsetting Chinese culture and actually becoming a part of the broader Chinese culture through Hinduism, etc. But I'm sort of wondering, and I'm going to ask a question first off before anybody else does. I'm sort of wondering, at the end you said that it sort of merged. Yes, sorry. It merged very well with Buddhism in China. But how well did it merge, say, with with Taoism or with Confucianism? What was the reaction of, Confucian elites or Taoist elites to this, Buddhism, these gods and goddesses, these strange creatures, in China? Just wondering.
Right. A very good question. Thank you. Can you imagine when a Hindu come to China, when they went to the Taoist temple or the place, they just automatically they live together, they practice together without saying anything. Actually, the concept of Tao and the concept of Brahman is exactly the same. And the way of practice for the priest is exactly the same. And even the festival of Taoism and Hinduism, we are not like the very quiet and formal in the church. We just mixed and have all sorts of fun. It's also exactly the same. So automatically, Hinduism is most like Taoism in China. So automatically you can understand. And even the gods, like three main gods. And in Taoism, we have three gods, exactly the same. So if you visit Taoist temple, if you're a Hindu, no problem at all. It's just by nature you can understand everything without have same language. You are already in the same language, actually. So for mixture with that, there are a lot of Hindus, they just join the Taoist without any question. I used to bring a Professor Kanungu from JNU.
Kanungu?
Yeah. And he worked in Leiden University and Germany University these days. And he came to China and he said he wanted to visit Taoist temple. And I bring him to the best one in Beijing. And immediately he can write articles on Taoism. So, a very good question, but we are talking about similarities, but not only similarities, but by nature we are already one in some sense, believe it or not.
Thank you. And the floor is open to questions now. Please, you want to introduce yourselves and then, yeah, please.
Madam, my name is K.S. Subramaniam. I am from South India, and we had ancient relations between India and China from south of India. So I am very happy that you refer to the South Indian part of the India-China connection. It's very, very good. Your lecture is extremely impressive, very beautiful photographs. I am really amazed that so much of Hindu culture has penetrated China. I never knew it. But then, I was myself in Chengdu recently. I visited your university. In fact, I participated in a seminar in your university. But we were discussing more international politics, diplomatic relations and so on. But I didn't have the chance to meet you. But I did meet the professor of political science from China. And, he showed me some of his writings. And I asked him, in which language do you write? He says he writes in Chinese. Now, in India, any professor who is anybody, he would be writing in English. I write all my articles in English. Whereas I know that you people are doing your own work in your own, that gives a lot of originality. And I visited China and I was in Chengdu and I traveled all around. I could see the cultural relations between India and China in the Buddhist, the giant Buddha in your part of China, I traveled there and it was an amazing sight to see the Buddha. Have you been to Chengdu and seen the giant Buddha there? It's a beautiful picture. But then I find Buddhism has had a bigger impact in China than Hinduism. And even, President Xi Jinping, who visited India recently and also went to China, he spoke about, the ancient Buddhist relations between China and Nepal. It's quite interesting. And I find that your president is a very learned person, unlike many people in India.
I'm going to have
many
to ask you to ask your question.
So, I'm asking questions. It's not we are debating and discussing. It cannot necessarily only be questions and answers.
So I understand you have concern about the language of
No, I want to know, basically, how is it that Buddhism survived in China in a big way, but it could not survive very much in India. Can you speculate on how Buddhism was able to establish itself in China much more than in India?
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a question that President Jiang Zemin asked in the embassy when he visited India many years ago. And it's Chinese always ask the same question. For Chinese, maybe it's a really pity for India, who lost the legacy of Buddha left, the three treasures, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, which we Chinese think is marvelous, and we follow this tradition. But I must say, Buddhism can flourish in China is because of Chinanization. So there are a lot of criticism about this Chinanization of Buddhism. We always have temples named by protection of the state, protection of nation, or building harmony, or something like this. Instead of in India, we always like temple named by the gods or goddesses, right? So it's really quite different in that way to develop. And for Buddhism in India, I don't think you completely lost the tradition of Buddhism. When I visit Varanasi, I visited some Hindu ashram. I found exactly the same thing as Buddhist, and there's no caste system in those ashrams, and they also worship Buddha as a Hindu god. Actually, it's a nice incarnation of Vishnu later on. But for those, I think that happened during the Bhakti movement in the medieval age. During that time, there is a mixture of Hinduism and Buddhism together, because Buddhism is difficult to survive under in the disordered period of time, under attack of some other forces. Because you can imagine if your temple is centered and all the monks live in the temple, and how about destroy the temple and destroy the whole community? But Hinduism, actually, you have this everywhere, in every household. So you can't destroy. You can never destroy. So that kind of structure of religion helps Hinduism to survive or even to flourish. But you can also help Buddhism to survive within the Hinduism. So for me, it's not really completely lost of tradition. But of course, within the Hindu tradition, you have to follow the Hindu rule. So that's we consider still Hinduism. But in China, they have to follow the Chinese way of living in the particular society. The most difficult one in the history is the Buddhist monks. They don't respect the king, but they cannot survive without that respect. So after they pass this difficult time, then there's no problem. Of course, you have to follow the like land system and other system, how the area you control or the function you can have, all sorts of things. You have to follow the rules of the government, the emperors, the kings of China. And for example, from Ming Dynasty, actually every priest or monks or Taoist priest, you have to pass exam by the state, by the government, and they give certificate. You become the full monk or you become the priest. That's tradition in China, and this is not happening in India. In India, you become a big guru or Baba or Swami, and because you can be that one, because you function like that one, because you can have a lot of followers, because you're good, automatically you become the leader of the group. All right. But in China, you have to pass that. You have to pass the exam given by the state. That means you know all the rules and the regulations of the government. You run in that temple or institute of religious organization. Thanks.
Any questions? Sir? Okay. Somebody have a question?
I want to ask. So, thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you for being one of the few Chinese scholars who are pursuing this research in this fascinating subject. I wanted to know whether you found any artifacts of Hindu gods and goddesses in China with Mongoloid features, some sort of local adaptation of Hindu gods and goddesses. The Mongoloid looking, so that was one question. And second was, you mentioned that the discovery of Narasimha, the sculpture, the statue, it is recent. So what facilitated, the timing of this discovery? What facilitated its discovery? And you said you were called to identify it, and you visited the village. And so, the timing of it, the discovery, and so I thought if you could just share some light on that.
Thank you. That happened in Fujian. Fujian province is the President Xi Jinping used to work there, and those area is the most how can I describe? They have a lot of folk religions, all sorts of gods and goddesses, just like Hinduism. So in that area, every village, they have their own temples or many temples, and they keep them well. They keep them for a long time, and anything like the statue of incarnation of Vishnu or others, anything related to the religion, to the gods and the goddesses they discover, they will put in the museum of the village. So all the village, since the last 10 years, the government encouraged the village to build what we call to build a new countryside movement. All the villages, they have their own museum or memorial hall to hold all this. So actually, like my picture to introduce of that statue, in the Indologist Conference, International Indologist Conference in Chengdu. My picture is even put in that villages museum. Very good question. So not everywhere in China have lots of revolution, destroy all the things it seems, but China is a large area. Some area like Fujian, they are very traditional and they protect all the things. And as a tradition, right? And it's a good question to link with this Taiwan. 17% of Taiwanese are actually from Fujian, this area. So they have exactly the same way of worship for that link. And the gods you mentioned, actually you can find in Yunnan province. They're still living. And still in the folk religion, we call it Benzu worship. Benzu means my own Lord worship. And Benzu, usually the villagers have many Benzu. One of them is Vishnu, one of them is Shiva. And yeah, they're always like that. But the story is exactly the same as how the Shiva with black skin, and the story is exactly the same. And those villagers, even now, they think we are descendants of Ashoka. And it's very interesting in the lake of Dianci, the area. You can find a lot of the temples. According to records, it's like 143 temples. Over 100 have been to of either Mahakala? Yes. Right.
Madam, I heard in China that both President Xi Jinping and his wife are practicing Buddhists. Is it correct? I don't know. Can you confirm or deny it?
As I said, repeatedly said that for Chinese, it's difficult to answer questions of what religion you have or what you believe. Usually we follow all sorts of schools of teaching. We don't have the concept of religion. In Chinese we call it 宗教. We don't have this concept before. It's just a way of living, and it's just a school of teaching. And from Spring and War area, very ancient time, 2,000 years back, we have that 100 flower period. And Confucian is only one of 100. And it grew fast and dominated. It's a later story. But with that, we really are short of something of Buddhist thought, of minds, to deal with mind. We Chinese never think about its importance of next life. We don't even believe next life. But with Buddhism, that helped Chinese to add that gap, that empty area. So that helped Chinese to think really meaning of life of Buddhism. So that's one reason why Buddhism flourished in China, because we need that. We don't have that part of thought, of teaching. So in China, the 宗教 religion is 宗, it means sect. 教 means teaching. So we have different school of teaching instead of religion. And I do think Xi Jinping is definitely Communist Party member, and the General Secretary, and he believes Communist Party. But that is political belief, all right? And as far as religion is concerned, it's his personal matter. His connect with and the spirituality and his family. His family we don't know. Yeah.
Thank you. We have two questions here coming up, Sanjeev, and then the young lady after that. Come, Sanjeev.
Thank you, ma'am. Two short questions. First, you very rightly mentioned that in 2013, Prime Minister Modi and Premier Qiu they participated in the joint event of yoga and Tai Chi. That given a very good impression in the two countries. And the establishment of yoga university in China. You also mentioned that there are some concerns about the religious aspect in China. If you could little bit elaborate on that, that's number one. And number two, in some of your papers, you argued that or referred that Hinduism, the impact of Hinduism is important because we can draw some inspiration for discourse building on Chindia, what you call. If you could elaborate this.
Thank you. As you know, there are lots of yoga centers in China now, and some centers they employ some Indians with the tourist passport, and they stay there and they're teaching Sanskrit, but they don't know Sanskrit actually at all, and they're teaching in not proper way and work in the wrong way, and stay in China just for earn money. So that is part of the concern. It's just not right, and this is because there are thousands of them from India. They work in the yoga center to earn money illegally. So that's part of concern. And for those who are not working in yoga center, they start something like a textbook class. Again, they say they're teaching language, but it's not. And China is good. We have that long tradition of very heavy learning and a lot of professors on Sanskrit and Hindi and other languages. So they cannot cheating, just saying they know Sanskrit or not. And for those ones, they find some private places and draw people, young people, to go there and to just recite the textbook of something. It's not typically Veda or Gita or others. It's some textbook produced by the own guru, or we never know. Maybe it's from the new religious movement branch, and the government don't know. So they are concerned, very much concerned. For protection of the cultural exchange, we have to make it clear what you can do, what you cannot do in China, and that's one. And what you are?
Inspiration from Hinduism.
Oh, right. Since the ICCR started the yoga college in Yunnan University, there are a lot of concerns that this kind of college actually has a spirit of software of India and soft power of India. And for me, who write the historical aspect and how this harmonious coexisted or even absorbed in the Chinese culture, I think that can encourage the government to understand and don't worry about this. Already passed through this thousands of years, there is no problem at all. So not over concerned about certain sense. We should have that confidence that, you see, Chinese, when we do research on religion, we always have concern about the religion and the security, religion and the public affairs, etc. So that's the Chinese way. when people raise questions like this college actually is doing something like that, we have to make it clear what happened in the history, what's the situation now, what the next could happen, and what concern we should have and what is too much. So for that we did some work as well, just to let people understand and let the government make it clear for the health development of the cultural exchange.
Ma'am, one knows of the presence of substantial Hindu and Sikh population in Afghanistan prior to 1990s. And I believe that many of the members of those communities were traders. And they used this ancient Silk Route to establish their trade relations between China and Afghanistan. From your research experience, did you get to know anything about those members, as in the Afghan Sikhs and Hindus, and what influence they might have, if at all they had any role to play in the flourishment of those two religions in China? Because I heard during my research that Afghan Sikhs have built a Gurudwara in China. During your research, did you get to hear about anything like that, or any role of Afghan Hindus in connecting these two countries, Afghanistan and China?
Sorry, I didn't do any research on Afghanistan at all.
No, because I'm talking about Afghan Hindus and Sikhs, and they had trade relations with China.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering that if through those trade relations, some sort of relations were established through which these exchanges also took place.
Which period are we talking about?
Yeah.
This is early 19th and 18th century.
I'm not sure, but we're talking to Professor Madhu Bhalla that those roads, the cultural atmosphere and the religious landscape has changed very much from the very ancient Hinduism to Buddhism and the latest to the Islam. So that change, that big change. So I doubt if the Sikhism and others are quite safe down that road. I'm not sure. Sorry, I didn't do any research on that.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions, please?
There was one there.
Someone? Where? Anybody for a question? No.
Dr. Gunjan, no? Question?
It's okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. I have a question before we end this one. You said something very interesting. You said that in the New Tsao, 7th to 10th centuries, Hinduism was actually a state religion. Brahmanism or Hinduism was a state religion. And I'm sort of wondering, how did it become a state religion? Because the impact of Hinduism has been fairly negligible. It's sort of become so much a part of Taoism, as you said, and so much a part of existing folk religions, as you said. So how did it become a state religion, and what happened to it after that?
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. They state three-state religion. One is Confucianism, another one is Taoism, and another one is called Fan, Sanskrit Fan. That one. So that one, because that some everything matched with Hinduism, so I translated it as Hinduism. They said it's Fanjiao, Sanskrit religion. So these three, because it's very easy to distinguish between the Buddhism and the others. That part become very interesting, and. Actually, that road we call Two-Horse Road Passage, small roads from Assam to Yunnan, and further to the Southeast countries, East Asia countries. For all this area, the influence is under Siva and Guanyin. So from the name, the text, you can think this is one family. Siva Guanyin. This is one family. And Guanyin, we use yin you count guan. Okay, guan yin. Yin is the voice. You can't look at voice. So okay, you can hear voice. So actually, guan is exactly the same name as Siva.
But it's
Okay.
a female form.
His female form. So that is a group, Siva Guanyin, flourished in Yunnan and Southeast Asia countries. That one. So mainly that area is influenced by Siva group and Guanyin. They are within one family. For the maritime circle, they are quite late, like Yuan and Ming dynasty, and the earliest time you can trace back is Tang dynasty, but not much. Most of them happened in Yuan and Ming dynasty. Though much later, but the most of it, though I mentioned all sorts of schools are there, but the most influential one is Vishnu school, Vishnu branch.
Madam, one more small question. You know, one of your slides on South India, there is a description of men and women, and there is a description of a lady or a woman. The particular word is used. I don't know what the meaning of the word.
Guanyin.
If you go to the slide, South India, there is a description of the Indian women. South Indian women, they are beautiful, he says, but particular word is used to describe the woman. I don't see what is the meaning of that word. I have not come across that word anywhere.
Oh,
Maybe in
that's
the Chinese
Italian one, fake one. Yeah, I don't know either.
This non-Zhao kingdom where you mentioned Hinduism as a state religion. So is the evidence literary or inscription from inscriptions? Or
Inscription and statue,
inscriptions?
yeah. And from the inscription, they describe the caste system. And the upcaste where this sacred strength. And they have landi, and they have some functions like the horse ceremony. Yeah. And all sorts of things you can only think about Hinduism. It's not like Buddhism at all.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? No. Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. It was really very illuminating because first of the range of it, in a sense, and you know the way in which you sort of looked at how Hinduism merged into local forms of worship and became so much more acceptable. So really interesting. And also I think your reference in your research and in your presentation, although you didn't explicitly say this, on the relationship between state and religion, especially in China, right? The fact that the state actually regulated and monitored religious practices and religious institutions, which, of course, from the Yuan dynasty onwards has been very, very apparent, you know, with the rise of Buddhism, etc. So, very interesting, because in a sense, I think the state has begun elsewhere as well to sort of look at religion as an aspect of the state. So it's an interesting phenomenon that we are looking at today as well across states and across countries. But you know, I'm sort of wondering where in this discussion of Hinduism in China, or why in this discussion of Hinduism in China, the state today in China is so eager to put its resources into research in this area. Is it just the idea that you discover something about Hinduism and that you understand India better? Or is it to discover your own historical past that has also been a pluralistic past? Yeah. So I'm just sort of wondering where do the threads of this research come from today in China?
Okay. It's not the government support me to do this research, or they think it's important. It's actually my self-interest to doing this kind of research. But I think I have very good reason to do this. We are celebrating the 100th anniversary of international studies in China this year. And we found that religion as a fact is always ignored in the international studies. And it seems all the religions are supposed to be followed instead of doing research. Especially in the after 9/11, in American scholars' language, when the religion take up the gun, that makes sense very differently. Religion is a fact in the international relations, especially international politics, is become more and more important subjects we have to study. As some of maybe you know that after 9/11, when Americans had the war on terror in Afghan area, and they started to have religious advisor in the military. Most of them are religious experts or sociologists. They found that they can avoid a lot of sad things happened. If you understand religion or understand the procedures, understand the doctrine, understand the practice, that's helpful. That's part of it. And for me, why go from history to contemporary, to go back to the history again? I think we can learn a lot from the history. If we think that more than 99.9% of time we have very good relations between China and India, and we never changed the position of both governments on the border issue for last 60 years. This, for me, not enough improvement on those kind of hard issues. And I think I want to follow the discipline of moderate construction study of international relations. So study religion, especially in the country like India, I think it's important for us to understand. And also, if you think about, to be frank, if you think about what happened in recent days, I think you see Hinduism in China is like this: peaceful, helpful, and reachful. So that's very much helpful to understand what China's openness to accept this culture from abroad, whatever. For the last 200 years, China's slogan is "Learn from the West," but it's now we should learn more from really West. That's India. I think it may be helpful for both governments, for Chinese government to realize how peaceful and what experience we have to deal with Hinduism in the ancient time, and maybe that will give us more confidence about our openness. For India, I think it's also helpful to through this to think about, because there is no Chinanization of Hinduism is already there. So why worry about it? And also, it's local people's willingness to reach us and reconnect it through that maritime Silk Road. That I think that is why Mr. Modi and Xi Jinping had that decision to deepen the cooperation in all the areas. Of course, cultural area is an important area in the China-India relations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing your insights to the issue. Thank you for bringing your research to our table here. And we hope that there will be more research on Hinduism in China, both from India as well as from China. Thank you very much.
May I take a time to present my book to you?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is an introduction to Hinduism
Thank you.
and my paper on Hinduism in Yunnan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take a photograph.
Photograph.
Oh, thank you. This one? Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you. Very interesting. Really.